Good. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for making it here. Braving the heat. I think it's still like 100-something degrees outside. You don't count humidity. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the cold water and maybe beers. I don't think you see one or two. And pizza. So this is Bighorn Over Beer. This happens on the third Thursday of every month. We just have a guest speaker. This time it's me. Sorry, I'm going to bore you. Come and give a presentation about some kind of crypto-related topic, and we have free food and drinks and networking with local crypto enthusiasts. So I think most of you guys have gotten to know each other pretty well. You guys should start bringing your friends, maybe. Fill up this room like we used to back when it was back market. Introduction to crypto is the first time watching something like this. This is our live stream. We've got a huge crowd of people here behind me. And we do free community events like this. Like I said, this is the Bighorn Over Beer, third Thursday in the afternoon. But we also do something called Crypto Over Coffee, which is every single Tuesday morning from 9 to 11. And it's the same format, but instead of beer and pizza, it is coffee and donuts. So on that note, next week's Crypto Over Coffee event, the guest speaker is going to be Corey. Last name, I don't remember his last name. Is it Corey? Corey. No, not Corey anymore. We switched it. And we're going to talk about Polygon. The week after that, Corey is going to come in and talk about DAOs. So that's going to be the next couple of week lineup. Don't forget about our Patreon exclusive events. That one from just last week. That's on the second Thursday of every month. Yeah. This last one, we had a pretty good talk about the market and some cool projects going on. Next month's Patreon exclusive event, we're going to be going to Topgolf.
All right.
The meeting there. So that one's going to be exciting, yeah. I also showed a couple of you guys who are in. I'm designing Crypto World Patreon challenge coins. Wow. So they're going to be metal coins that you get if you're a Patreon member. There's our QR code there on the back. And so you can scan that whenever you want, or you can have someone else scan it, and it'll take them to all of our really important links anytime we've got something going on. So useful piece of hard asset, right? And something else cool about it, they're going to be sequentially numbered around the end. So maybe once a month, we're going to pick one of our Patreons to win some kind of prize, depending on what number your coin is. All kinds of cool stuff going on.
How do you become a Patreon member?
Great question. First, you could scan that QR code right up there. Maybe people on here can't see it, but if you were to go on to patreon.com and search up Crypto World, or you can go to the website and click on, I think it's called support. There's a couple of ways you can support us, either by making a donation or becoming a Patreon. That gets you access. I believe the $20 a month tier gets you access into our Patreon exclusive event, and it's very similar to what we're doing right now, except we take all of these tables and we push them into the middle of the room and make a round table. It's technically still square, but we all sit around it. And we talk about whatever we want. There's no set topic. So instead of getting lectured like you guys are about to be, it's a free-form discussion, and it's a really good time. Sometimes we'll go out to places like Topgolf or somewhere else where we fun and just have a good time. So I think I'm going to go and get started with tonight's presentation, which is going to be about immersion mining. How many of you guys already know what immersion mining is? Yeah, Corey, I know you do. Hopefully you guys can learn something about immersion mining tonight that you didn't already. I'm going to go over some math on the board that I was actually doing earlier today, and I got pretty excited about it. I discovered some pretty interesting things that I think you guys would be interested to know. So first and foremost, what is immersion mining? At its core, immersion mining and the technology behind it is just thermal management. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking a piece of IT equipment, like a computer, some kind of hardware that gets hot, and you are putting it into a thermally conductive but electrically insulative fluid. So usually, we're all used to, at least we were used to saying, like, okay, don't get your computer wet, don't get your phone wet. Nowadays, with electronics being more and more waterproof, that's not necessarily a problem. I think there was a commercial I saw, it was a while ago now, of people pouring water all over their phones. They're just doing it for fun. Typically, that's a big no-no, but this is a very special kind of fluid. It's called dielectric fluid, and it actually does not corrode PCBs, and it does not electrically conduct, so you're not going to short out any kind of circuits. But the whole idea is you push this fluid into the system with the electronics that are in the fluid, heat it up, get the fluid hot. That hot fluid is then pumped out and cooled and then reintroduced to the system. So here's a pretty cool picture of, I think, servers in a immersion tank. And it's literally a box full of this dielectric fluid. It's just getting pumped around. Here's a big 5-gallon drum of it, which you guys aren't going to get a very good concept of what it is. But if you want to come up here and touch it, it feels like oil. It's pretty interesting.
That's how he works out.
Yeah, I just stand back here and just curl these whenever no one's here. So a little bit more about immersion. I thought this was pretty interesting. The first use of immersion technology, like for cooling it with a fluid, like I just described, was actually used on transformers in the year 1887, usually before 1887, actually. Pretty fascinating. The first patent to explicitly mention immersion cooling was, I guess, submitted in 1899, and that was by General Electric in Massachusetts. And that was also for just insulators and circuitry. The first reference to immersion mining being used for what we now know as computers was in the 60s by IBM. So a little background there. So really what you should be asking is why immersion? And there are lots of reasons that you would want to immerse not only your Bitcoin miners, obviously that's what we're talking about here, but your computers in general. One of them is it increases the efficiency of your system, and it actually extends its lifetime as well. So because your equipment, your electronics are being kept colder, it's just inherently going to run more efficiently. You are feeding power into this new system to keep it colder. So you do have to account for that if you're going to do any kind of calculations. But overall, there's going to be a net positive increase in efficiency. As you can see in this picture, super dusty computer. Whenever you're immersing a system in fluid, you're completely removing the chance of any kind of dust or debris getting clogged up into that system. I've cleaned some L3s and I've seen some S19s come in that were just caked with dirt. I mean, you take stuff off and it looks like a bird like built a nest in it. It's really bad. And those are all things that can decrease the lifetime of your machine if you're not diligent about keeping it clean, routinely taking it apart, wiping it down. We actually just put out a video on YouTube of me showing how to clean an ASIC miner in order to prepare it for being put into an immersion tank. And the reason for that is because if you were to put a dusty one or one that had a little bit of debris into an immersion tank and start pumping that fluid through, that debris would get into the fluid and into the pump and the pipes, and it would just clog everything up and cause problems later down the road. So that's a good thing to do, is clean things before you would put them into the fluid. Reason number 2 is what that's supposed to be, overclocking. So you guys know what overclocking is? It's when you push, essentially you're pushing more power to your Bitcoin miner or whatever other miner you have, and you are squeezing more hash rate out of the system. And you're actually going to be increasing your daily yield in whatever asset you're mining by doing that. So an S19 standard is 3.25 kilowatts. That's how much power it takes to keep it on and doing what it does. Without changing out the power supply, which I'll show on this one. So this is an S19J Pro. I don't know how many terahash this is. It doesn't really matter. But this big brick with 3 tinier fans, that's the power supply. And that's what you actually would plug into the wall. Without changing out that PSU to a bigger custom one, you can overclock that S19 to 4.6 kilowatts, which is, I think, a 40% increase. You can overclock an S19 like that to even higher levels, but you would have to swap out the PSU to really give it more juice that it needs. And overclocking can increase the yield of your miner. So can you see the whiteboard on here? Okay, I'm going to do some quick math. So let's do a standard S19. Yeah, I said it was 3.25 kilowatts. In order to keep it on, you're going to run that 24 hours a day. And the local electricity rate here is 9 cents per kilowatt hour. And so that works out to about $7 a day. I think it's like $7.02 or something like that. But we'll just say $7 a day. A standard 100 terahash S19 makes about 4 10,000ths of a Bitcoin per day. Bitcoin per day. And just for the sake of easy math, let's say that a Bitcoin is $50,000. And that would mean your gross would be $20 per day. And that's what you're earning in USD worth of Bitcoin every day. So your net for that would be $13 per day. Then if you were to overclock of the same miner, that would be 4.6 kilowatts. You're going to run it again 24 hours a day, same power rate. We're assuming you're not going to immerse it, so you're not going to have the difference in something like this, or you're not going to put it anywhere else. That comes out to $990. I want to check in on that. Probably close enough. And then a 40% increase on your yield would be 56 10,000ths. Yeah. Bitcoin per day. Same price of Bitcoin, $50,000 Bitcoin. And that is $28. 28 even? Yeah.
So 9.3 or 994.
994? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, close enough. So it's like $18.10 a day. So by overclocking it by 40%, even if you weren't going to put it into an immersion tank, you're making another $5.10 a day that you wouldn't otherwise. So that's why you would want to overclock something, just to increase your yield.
You would have to upgrade the power supply with a different one, correct, for that?
Not for this. Nope. 4.6 kilowatts. That is a 40%. Pretty close to 40%. And that's what you can reach with a standard PSU.
Got you.
So reason number 3, easier domestic use, right? I don't know how many of you guys have actually heard a real S19 running in person. They're pretty loud. And for reference here, hopefully you guys can kind of see this. An S19 like this puts out about 80 decibels, which is somewhere between a vacuum cleaner and a lawnmower, just running 24/7. There's a really funny video on YouTube of a guy talking about how you can use an S19 in my home. And he has a decibel reader. And he goes and he stands next to a whole bunch of different things that are making noise. And in one, he just shouts at the top of his lungs. And that's about as loud as an S19 is. So just imagine having a full-grown man standing in your laundry room screaming 24/7. That's about how loud they are. And they produce about 11,000 BTUs of heat, which I think I'm going to get to later. I'll get back to that later, how much heat they produce. But it can definitely heat your home. And there's some other cool things you can do with the heat. We'll get to that later. The fans are what is loud, though. So if you were to take those fans off, all of a sudden there's nothing making noise, right? It's all solid state electronics. The fans are what are noises. So when you take the fans off and you put it into an immersion tank, and you've got the tank moving the fluid through, which there are debates on how to do that the most efficiently, you're essentially removing all of the heat and the noise now from the Bitcoin miner. You're taking that heat, you're putting it somewhere else, and you're cooling it. Usually you can take it into a dry cooler, right? The hot fluid gets moved out, cooled off outside with a big fan system that's about as large as an AC unit, and then pumped back in. So whenever you're inside, you wouldn't even know that you're mining. Reason number 4 is actually reusing heat energy. So the laws of thermodynamics, if you guys are familiar at all with that, first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. So something interesting about Bitcoin miners or miners in general, they are almost 100% taking electrical energy that you feed it and turning it into heat. It's almost 1-to-1. If you don't account for the fans, right? The fans are creating kinetic energy, so you're losing a little bit to that. But once you remove the fans, all it is a heater. You're turning all the electrical energy into heat. So modern day immersion tanks can actually remove about 99% of the heat that the Bitcoin miner is producing. And you can take that 99% of that heat and you can do whatever you want with it. There's a lot of really cool things that people have done. Next slide. Nope, not that one yet.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry, before you move on. When you said 11,000 BTUs plus 19
Yeah.
gives off, is that standard or overclocked?
Standard. So 3.25 kilowatts is 11,000 BTUs. Yeah. So kilowatts is imperial. Now what's metric? That's metric. And then here the United States typically use BTUs. Some of the things that have been done with the reused heat from an immersion system. Community greenhouses are a popular one. Over in Europe, I think someone built a huge community greenhouse powered exclusively by Bitcoin miners. And I forget what the square footage was. It was something ridiculous. And actually, the reason for that is you'll get a grasp of how big it could have been. There is enough heat coming out of a 4 megawatt immersion system, which I'll show a picture of later. It's 960 miners, I believe. There's enough heat coming out of that, 4 megawatts worth of heat, right, 1-to-1, if you can capture about 99% of it, to boil a community pool. If you're to put all that heat energy into a standard size community pool, you can actually boil the water. It's incredible. So community pools, you can do that. You can heat a community pool, you can heat a hot tub, you can heat roads, right? You could heat, I don't know how many miles of roads, so that no matter what the winter weather hazard conditions are, you would need to plow your roads. Another cool one that I found was, again, I think somewhere in Switzerland or something, there is a whiskey distillery that is powered like 90 to 95%, I think, by Bitcoin miners. They need a lot of heat, so that's where they get it from. So this is actually reusing the heat from the energy that you put into the immersion system, or into the Bitcoin miners rather, for green purposes like all of these, is a really great way to make the mining model sustainable. So now you are putting in energy, but you're using it twice. You're using it first to secure a decentralized peer-to-peer currency, and then you are taking 99% of that energy and you're pumping it right into something else. You need a greenhouse, heating water for kinds of purposes, heating roads, all kinds of community projects, beautification, whatever you want. And for people who argue that Bitcoin is a waste of energy, they really just don't understand, first and foremost, the value that Bitcoin brings to society itself. I would argue you don't even need to use the energy for anything else. Spin those fans as fast as they need to be spun, and let's use Bitcoin. Question?
Could you, if you're capturing 99% of the energy back, could you reuse that to say heat a steam engine, thus creating electrical energy again and repeating critical loop?
So there are ways, not an infinite loop. There's always going to be loss. There's no free energy.
That could bring down your electrical cost if you're reusing.
Right. If you were to, there are ways to convert heat energy back into electrical energy. There's more loss there than going the other way, just because of the way the technology works right now. But yeah, you could turn that heat back into electrical energy, store it into a battery or something like that, and then only use grid power whenever you don't have enough battery.
Yeah. But it wouldn't really matter compared to the alternative if there's loss. Anything you capture at all is just free energy at that point.
Right. Yeah. If you want to
because you've already free, in quotes, meaning that you've already spent it from
Right.
Burning coal or whatever somewhere else.
What's the loss rate on the conversion back from?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I don't remember that. I don't remember that. Yeah. You got me there.
Yes.
So here's that 4 megawatt system that I was talking about earlier. This is from DCX, which I don't remember what DCX stands for, but they're a group based out of Poland, and they are kind of the go-to immersion tank guys. But this is a 4 megawatt system. Each one of these little cubes here holds 8 S19s, 8 of those, with the fans removed, pointing to the right direction. And then there are 4 rows of 10 stacked 3 high. So I'm pretty sure that's 960 S19s. And then all of the fluid is just pumped out to these dry coolers, which would be on the outside of the building, right? You would build a building around that portion. And then if you didn't want to reuse the heat, all just gets pumped up into the air, and then the cool fluid is pumped back in. So next, we'll talk about ROI changes. I did some asking around in forums and other places like that. And there is a misconception out there that by adding an immersion system to your mining operation, that your ROI is going to be pushed back. And technically that's true if you didn't overclock, right? If your hash rate is going to remain the same, therefore your daily yield in Bitcoin is going to be the same, then your ROI, of course, is going to be pushed back because you're adding more to your initial startup costs. But if you were to overclock, which is kind of the whole point of putting your system into an immersion tank, besides the fact that there's less heat being put out into your home and less noise being created, your ROI is actually going to come back a little bit. And yes, that also accounts for the power that the tank uses. The only power that this tank uses is in a little tiny pump and an electrical readout, so it's almost negligible. And maybe I should just show you guys this tank right now. We'll take this off. So this actually is the upgraded power supply unit that I was talking about. This would be, I would take that old PSU off, slap this new one on, and
What was the
then
new PSU cost?
Hmm?
What was the new PSU cost?
Great question, Jeff.
Roughly $100.
Yeah, it's really not too bad. Which is why I didn't really include it in my calculations, because it's almost negligible.
6,000 watt power supply.
Yeah.
I think they go 8,000.
So this immersion tank that we got in, I was really hoping I could demo it live for you guys, but the electrician to come and put the a couple of 20 amp breakers in our system and put all the wires in the ceilings and everything, he couldn't do it in less than 24 hours. So don't blame him there too much. Yeah, just set that there. This is a pretty interesting tank. This one doesn't look a lot like the one that we're actually working to make. Crypto World is working with a local team of engineers to build our own immersion tank. And we're going to hopefully make that available end of this year if all goes well. But this is one that we got so that I can just show it to you guys. Read out there on the front, and this is what the inside looks like. So there's a sort of like a dry cooler on the inside there. There's some heat dispersion fins and a couple of fans that actually move the fluid throughout the system. Here on the side is that pump, and then this would be the tube that you would connect, not the Ethernet cable, from here to here. And I think there's something else in the system that we're missing, but we were waiting on the rest of the documentation to determine that. But if you guys can see those 2 fans in there, those 2 fans would match up with the fans that you would take off of the S19. And so the whole point is to push that fluid through here, through this area, this cross-sectional area of the miner, where all the heat's actually being generated. So I think next I'm going to talk about, so this is actually the really interesting thing that I found today. I was making this presentation and I was trying to do some math to see, okay, exactly how much would your ROI change? And ever since I started here with Crypto World, I've got a degree in physics and I never use it. I've never used it, I probably never will. But I dusted it off and I did some extra math today. I found out that your ROI, right, your return on your initial investment, is only going to decrease by incorporating an immersion system into your mining operation if the percentage by which you overclock your miner it'll go down if that percentage is greater than the percent change in your startup cost. It's crazy. That's something I never really thought about. Maybe it's obvious, but for those two percentages to match, I was pretty impressed. So, for example, if you know that you can overclock your S19 by 40% by using a standard power supply, and let's just say, for the sake of math, an S19 is going to cost $6,000. You can do some quick math and figure out that your budget for an immersion tank, if you don't want your ROI to be pushed back, would be $2,400. It's 40%, because that number has to match of your startup costs. So your budget for a single unit immersion tank like this one would need to be $2,400. If it's any,
I'm sorry. I would say that's just year one. After that, your ROI is higher. Your AROI.
Yeah, it's 1 year.
yeah. And it also depends on, this does not account for changes in mining difficulty. And it also doesn't account for, so for anyone who doesn't know, the way that you, or at least most people, shorthand calculate ROI is they take the cost of the miner and then they factor in the current day Bitcoin price, right? And so, unfortunately, what that means is if you're to take, let's just say for the sake of easy math, a $20,000 Bitcoin, $20,000. So this would be 20,000. That would make this $8 a day. So 8 minus 7, that's only $1 per day. And at $6,000, let's just say for easy math again, $6,000 cost, you're netting $1 a day. That is how many years? 14, 15, 16 years ROI, right? So that's the flaw in how most people calculate their ROI on purchasing mining equipment. We've gotten into Reddit arguments with people who, were selling S19s and like, you do know that the ROI on an S19 is 15 years. Like, okay, do you really think that Bitcoin is going to stay at $20,000 15 years from now, let alone 1 year from now? So unfortunately, this model that I've made still uses that same method of calculating ROI. And that is it I've got for the presentation. Hopefully you guys have learned a little bit more about immersion mining, and I'm going to take some questions if anybody has them.
What's the expected life expectancy of an immersion tank?
Good question.
The fluid. Do you know how often you have to change the fluid?
Mm,
You don't have to.
yeah, you typically don't. The only time that you would need to, there's two ways. If you did not fill up the tank correctly, so when you fill up the tank and you've got it running and there's a whole bunch of bubbles in it, and those bubbles don't go away, those bubbles being pushed through your miner are going to cause problems. And that's usually if you don't prime your pump right. It's pretty easy to avoid. The other one will be if you didn't clean your miner properly and you start to see that there's gurgling or clogs happening or the fluid's not flowing the way that it should, then you'd have to change it out again.
Is there kind of an industry standard or assumption that an S19 should last 3 to 4 years before you fully depreciate?
Yeah, what's the warranty on an S19?
Well, it's really a year. Now, Bitmain is limited to like 6 months, but the S19s they're a tank. But rarely any issues, so you can go years unless it's dirty.
Unless it's dirty.
Yeah,
That's
but
the biggest
but at
factor.
some point in time, the processor speeds are
Right.
continually increase, right? So at some point in time,
Well, I mean that like
the
S9s,
energy cost and
Yeah, like the S9s people are still using in South America. S9s. So it really depends on the cost of your electricity.
Yeah, so
Nobody's been able to run them out. They just-
really,
they
yeah,
just
the
came out a
answer
couple
to your
years ago.
question,
So-
the answer to your question is as long as you need it to be. So it's all solid state. There's no moving parts. As long as you have the power cost to make it profitable. How old are the S9s now?
Oh, those are like 7, 8
Six,
years old.
yeah, 7 or 8,
Yeah,
I think.
they're pretty old.
Between 6 and 8 years old, and they're still chugging along as long as people have cheap power to make them profitable.
Yeah, they have the new 140s that are coming out for $8,000-$10,000. But you can easily take these 100s and make them 140, just overclock them, and you can get those for $4,000 to $5,000.
So I assume the merchant tanks are generally targeting the data centers, right, lighting centers. Could you put one of those in your home and put it out through like a
Are you
dryer?
talking about your project for it?
No, but yes, you can, and we will.
Yeah. That's actually what this is designed for. And the one the crypto world is designing is what it's going to be meant for home use.
Yeah.
The one that I showed the big picture of with all of the racks, and that one, that's for a data center. That'll be a data center size.
Because the conspiracy theorist in myself, I look at data centers and they're already trying to come up with ways to stop, some of the politicians. So I wonder, like, at some point in time, are they going to be able to tax the data centers to where it'd be more profitable to mine it right out of your house because they're not going to be able to do that to people that are doing it in their homes.
I can see that. Taxes will. What's the quote? There's only one thing that's certain in life: death and taxes. Two things. Yeah, death and taxes. Good question.
DCX sells what they call like a for the home version, where they sell you just one of the
Bitbox or Bitpod, one of those. Yeah.
Well, the Bitpod's like a 2-miner home one, but they also call one of these cells on the rack right there for a home version. But they'll ship that like with a dry cooler. I happened to just watch it yesterday. They put the whole thing on one pallet to ship straight from Poland. Dry cooler, fluid, cell, whatever. But it holds 8 of the miners, and according to my electrician friend, that takes an entire 200 amp panel to be able to power like 7 of them in the immersion thing. So most people don't have the power at their house for that, but even 2 is a pretty significant draw on your electric panel at your house.
Yeah, that's true.
How much wear and tear do you think are the fans getting moving that fluid inside the tank?
Great question. That's part of the reason I don't like this tank design. I've got a lot of questions about it. I'd love to meet the people who designed it. I think it's designed to be pretty cheap, and I don't have a lot of confidence in the way that it's put together, especially because you're pushing the fluid horizontally, right? And so because heat rises, you're not going to get a very efficient flow of temperature. There's going to be some very interesting quirks with this, I think. More often than not, and the good, awesome things, you want to have your miners all standing upright, and the cool fluid is pumped directly in from the bottom, and then gets heated up as it travels up, and then the hottest fluid from off the top is skimmed off some kind of reservoir, and then that gets pumped out and cooled. So.
In this model, are those fans acting as the pump? I don't see a pump.
There's a tiny pump right here. That's, I believe that's right here. This is just helping make the cooler fluid go through the miner. So we'll see. We'll see.
I have a question. You are recording for the YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any questions on there?
So I can go and watch again, right?
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
Oh, Jeff, let me check.
Come on, Mike, where you at?
You had one, Jeff.
Yeah, and it ended 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
No, we're good. Just scams.
Scams.
If you were going to funnel the heat off of it, off of something like that, into something else, how would you do that?
On something like this, I would have to tear everything out and just use the box. That gets a little bit more complicated.
I see a fish tank. Whenever I look at that,
This here?
yeah,
Yeah.
build it just like a fish tank, an acrylic fish tank where you can put a sealed unit.
Yeah.
You know, and then run your pump. You can cool it outside. and everything.
So this is one of the guys that I was talking about. You see, he's got it vertically. This guy's YouTube channel is Space Design Warehouse. And I think he does a whole bunch of stuff, but more recently it's been all mining, all crypto, Space Design Warehouse. And he experimented with building his own immersion system. And he's actually the guy that talks about he did it wrong the first time. He had a whole bunch of bubbles in there that was going to break his miner, so he had to dump everything back out. And he did it the crazy, dirty way. He just kind of figured it out as he went along, which is a really fun way to do it. But he's had several disasters and a whole bunch of broken stuff, but it makes for good content, I guess. So yeah, I definitely a channel I would recommend you check out.
So that was Space Design Warehouse.
Yeah.
What was that Polish company you're talking about?
DCX.
DCX?
Yep, out of Poland. DCX Immersion.
Do you have a target price in mind for what your in-home?
It's all speculative right now. We would love to retail it for less than $2,000. Depending on manufacturing, it
And
might
for
be
one?
right at 2,000. Right, for a single
Just single miner.
miner.
Yeah, that one right there is about $1,200. But it's made out of China.
I'm not convinced it's going to do what they think it's going to do.
And you said you have a machine shop here locally working on it for you?
Engineered fluids is another good resource. They keep all like the materials that are conducive with the dielectric fluid that goes through there. What kind of pipes you want to use, everything like that. If you're going to try to build it, you should just buy the one here. But I'm saying if you're trying to learn more about the materials and what works together, engineered fluids.
Yeah, they have a clear tank that holds either 2 S19s or 3 Watts miners in there. I want to say it's like $4,500 or so. Okay.
One of the bigger problems is the fans. It's like when Kevin mentioned that, well, you could throw 8 on there and put a 200 amp panel in there. You can, but you're solving for heat and noise. And sure, you can't hear it while you're sitting in your living room. But if it's outdoors, you still have to get rid of that BTU rating, which is what, 250,000, and it's probably way more than that. And they don't currently make fans that are quiet enough for you to do that. So that would be why you wouldn't run 8 of them.
DCX claims to have 2 56 decibel fans on the dry cooler they ship with.
You sure do. I've seen, they have like these 40 kilowatt ones, and they're supposed to be pretty quiet. Some people do put them in their house, in the backyard, but I haven't seen anybody like thrilled about it. And then the temperature gets above 90 degrees. I've seen complaints about it not cooling anymore. So it's still in the works. We'll get there, and when we do, great. But right now, it's still a problem cooling. There's a problem in noise. There's a problem.
Yeah, this Bitcoin mining in general has really created, in and of itself, the demand for immersion cooling at home. Immersion technology used to only be something for data centers, right? But now you're seeing a market appear just out of thin air because of demand for immersion tech at home. You just want to slap 1 or 2 Bitcoin miners in and let them rip quietly.
Do transformers have fluid in them?
Do
Like
transformers have
transformers?
fluid in them? It's like standard
I don't know. It's just
for
a question.
cooling
I
purposes.
know you mentioned that they used it in then in 1900s, but do they do it now? I don't know.
That's a
It's
good
just
question. I haven't taken apart
Like, how do they
like
cool it?
big
Yeah,
transformers.
they do it. Yeah.
I think, gosh, if I had to, I'm going to say no.
I think
but
they do
might.
also know the back porch of my neighbor and a bunch of electrical engineering guys. They're like, "You see that over there on the pole? That's got the dielectric fluid or whatever you're."
Oh, really?
And I was telling them about mining.
Up on like a telephone pole.
But I'm not 100% sure. Google probably knows, but I think that you're on something.
Google probably knows. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that's standard, but I'm sure some transporters do.
I couldn't find the size of that greenhouse. I was trying to look it up, but Bitcoin Bolem is BLOEN is the name of the company that's doing it. They're actually selling flowers with kind of cryptocurrency named different kinds of flowers, which is kind of unique. But yeah, so unfortunately, I couldn't find the size of the greenhouse. They're shipping the flowers worldwide, I think. They're big enough, they have enough inventory to build the ship all over.
Oh, anything Bitcoin, you got a market.
Especially during a bull run.
I use Bitcoin soap all the time.
Any other questions?
Oh,
Apologize that the question was already answered. How do immersion miners deal with component corrosion over time?
Yeah, so the dielectric fluid does not corrode the PCBs. You do need to be careful and make sure that you're actually getting dielectric fluid. And that was something that other fluids like mineral oil do. They do corrode the PCBs. But with the Bitcool 88 fluid and a lot of the other standard fluids now, the immersion cooling technologies companies are using, there's no problem. Cool. But that's it. I'll let you guys keep eating and drinking and talking. Thank you guys very much for coming.
Rich Ackerman.